All right, today we're going to talk about whether or not you should sell your current home before you buy that next one.
You better get fired up.
All right, welcome, man. It's Friday. We made it. I hope you guys had a phenomenal week. I hope you have an even better weekend. Today we're going to talk about you currently owning a home, wanting to buy another home, and having the strategy in your mind or the conversation in your mind of, man, do I sell this home first or do I not sell this home first? I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons. I will say this, there's no black or white answer. It's different for everybody depending upon your scenarios. In most cases, for a particular person, I would say 95% of the time, it's very clear cut as to whether or not they should or should not sell first. But sometimes it's very gray, and explaining the pros and cons is helpful, right? So this video is probably created for those people more than any. But here's the general scenario we're talking about. You're going to go out and purchase a home, but you currently own a home. Should I sell this home first or not? What are some of the drawbacks, right? So let's talk about selling your home first, which, hey, here's one of the pros. It gives you the cash in hand to be able to either purchase that next one with cash or put more down for the down payment and everything else on that next one. It also helps you because you're getting rid of all that debt on your current mortgage. It helps you with your debt to income ratios and allows you to get approved for more, right? Most people are not going to be able to afford two houses at once. So if the lender says no, it's a no. But if you're in a situation where you've got the income to afford the current house, or I mean, if you don't own or if you don't have a mortgage, own a mortgage. If you don't have a mortgage on that first home, you own it free and clear. You don't have a lot of debt associated with that property. Now it's going to be a little bit easier to go out and get approved for that second property while owning that first one, right? So every scenario is different. Here's the deal. Let's talk about, again, you selling that home first. One challenge is, what happens when you get an offer from a buyer and you accept that offer? And now you've got the challenge of, okay, where am I going to live if I don't get my next place under contract and close on that at the same time or earlier than this one? That's a challenge, right? So yes, you can rent, but if you're going to rent, here's some more issues you've got to think about. What are you going to do with all your stuff? Are you going to bring it to that rental? What if that rental's a month or 2 months or something like that, right? Where are you going to put all that stuff? How much is it going to cost you? I'll tell you, I moved 3 blocks. And to move 3 blocks, and we did a lot of the work, right? I packed it into all the boxes. We paid for them to grab the boxes, put it on the truck, go 3 blocks, take them off the truck and put them in our house. We did all the unpacking. So we did all the packing, we did all the unpacking. From memory, I think that cost us $3,000 to $4,000 to go 3 blocks. So if you're going to do that and you're going more than 3 blocks, maybe you got a bigger house than I do with more stuff. And if you're going to have, the holding costs of holding it somewhere, you're going to have costs associated with that. You want to take that into consideration, right? Also, you might say, well, why wouldn't I bring it to my rental? Most people, if they're looking for a 1 to 2 month rental, they want something that's as cheap as possible. And I'm going to talk about this in a second, but 1 to 2 month rentals are not cheap. They're way more expensive per month than a normal rental where you're going to get a 12-month contract, because the landlord's thinking, hey, I don't get a 12-month juicy contract out of you. In a month or two, I'm going to have to spend all that money to go out and remarket this property, right? And then I'm going to have a certain period possibly of not having the property rented out, which means I'm going to be paying for that mortgage and I got no income to cover that. So I'm going to have to put that on a short-term renter, and it's going to be more expensive. In a lot of cases, getting an Airbnb or a VRBO is going to be your cheapest, most accessible option. And that option is not cheap. Go look them up right now. You'll see that option is not cheap. Now, I will say, whatever they're proposing that you pay for a nightly fee to get a VRBO or an Airbnb, there are a lot of these properties that if you contact them and say, hey, I'd like it for a month or 2 months or whatever it is, you're not going to get the rent you're looking for, right? So like in Port St. Lucie, cheaper rentals start like in the $2,000 to $2,500 range. You might find some under $2,000. You're not probably going to find any VRBOs or Airbnbs in that range. But if you're looking at something that's $150 a night times 30, that's $4,500 a month. You probably won't have to pay $4,500, right? But I'm guessing you're going to be in the $3,000, $3,500 range in a market like this for a VRBO or an Airbnb. So that's something you want to take into consideration. Also, because you're looking for a place that's cheap it's probably going to be a little bit smaller than the current house you're in. Not always, but possibly. So you might be thinking, I'll just move all the stuff in there. You might not be able to fit it, right? So now are you going to, because you want the convenience of having your couch and your bed and your TV and everything else, are you going to pay for 2 shipments? One shipment to your new rental to bring half of your stuff, and another shipment to go to a storage facility because it won't fit in your rental. And then when you're going to go to the new place that you purchase, you've got to pay again, or you're doing the work, right? I'm saying pay. Some of you guys are going to do this physical work yourself, but you're paying for that too in time and physical effort, right? Are you going to pay again to get half of your stuff, which is in the rental, shipped to the new house, and half of the stuff in the storage facility shipped to the new house? Oh, by the way, you still got the month or two's worth of storage fees for the stuff that's remaining in storage, right? So think of all those things when you're considering this. The other issue we already talked about it is getting approved. Are you going to, not if you're keeping it. So you're keeping the house. Really, that's the biggest issue, is what are you going to do with the stuff? And a lot of people are freaking out, especially if you've got kids. What if I don't find that next place? Now, where am I going to rent? How much is it going to cost to rent? You'll find a rental. The problem is not finding a rental. The problem is finding a rental that most people want to pay the rent on, which is that $2,000 to $2,500 range. You're probably not going to find that, right? So that's the challenge that people are having. So just take all of that into consideration. I wouldn't say do it or don't do it because of that. I'm a big, take the emotion out of it as much as possible guy, and just look at the numbers, right? Because the alternative is, like, here's another thing I've heard people say: hey, I'm going to put my home in the market with you, Joe, but when I get that offer, I want to put verbiage into that buyer's offer on my property that says I've got, pick your number, 30 days to go and find a property that's suitable for me. And if I don't, I can cancel this contract. And I'll tell people, listen, you can do that. But if this is the buyer pool for your house, every time you throw up a red flag or an issue or a hurdle or whatever you want to call it, the buyer pool goes every single time. You want to overprice your home, right? You don't take professional photos, the buyer pool gets smaller, right? You tell people, hey, once we get an offer, I get 30 days to get out of that deal, and I'm going to go look for a new home, right? Buyer pool gets smaller. Anytime the buyer pool gets smaller, yes, it's harder to sell. Yes, it's going to take you longer, but it's also going to cost you money, because those buyers know this is a tougher home to sell because of the terms offered. So we can come in 5, 10, 15, 20 grand low, whatever it is. And is that going to make up for the storage costs and the higher rent that, if you were to sell the home first and go do that, doesn't make up for it? And that's a long discussion and a lot of analysis that a realtor like me is going to do with you before you make that decision. But I always try to tell people, I know it's coming, right? I know the emotion's coming. They're going to, I'm never doing that, and this is stupid. And I just let them do it. And then when they're done, I say, let's run the numbers. Let's see what happens. And also, convenience versus money is a big thing when you're selling a home, when you're buying a home. So a lot of times people instantly up front want convenience, right? Here, convenience is, I want that offer to say that I get 30 days to go buy a home, or I can back out of this deal. That's convenient for you. That convenience costs you money. And up front, I've seen this so many times. People want the convenience. I'll mention the money and they say, well, I'm not doing that. If they want my house, they'll pay for it. And then I got to say, listen, that's not the way it works. Like, the buyer pool is going to get smaller. You can say if they want my house, they'll pay for it. But I'm telling you, statistically, less people are going to be willing to pay for it. And the people who are going to pay you less. So you're choosing money or convenience. Which do you want? Neither answer is wrong. It's just important that you know what it is you want, and that's what you're going after, right? Guys, while I'm going through this, if you got any questions, if anything I'm saying isn't clear, feel free to put in the comments and I'll absolutely respond to your questions, right? So let's talk about keeping the home. You're going to keep home number 1, and you're going to purchase and close on home number 2, and then you're going to sell home number 1. I'll tell you, from a realtor's perspective, that is beautiful. Here's another issue that I didn't mention with selling your home before you go buy that next home. A lot of buyers who have to sell first want to go put that offer in on that home, that next home, contingent on the sale of their current home. Well, I can tell you, no seller likes that. You wouldn't like it if you were a seller, right? What do you mean a contingency on the sale of my home? That means if my home doesn't successfully close on time to be able to grab that money and fund this property or part of this property, I have the right to back out and there's no negative consequences to me. Sellers look at that and they think, well, I don't control that offer. I don't know who that buyer is. I don't know that lender. I don't know who that other agent. I don't know any of that stuff. Man, I feel like I'm out of control. Now, if it's a strong buyer's market, you might get somebody who agrees to that. I can tell you back in 08, 09, that was pretty common. I can tell you a year or two ago, zero zilch, nobody was doing that, right? Because they had full power, the sellers did. Now in this market, you might get some people who will agree to it. I'll tell you, generally speaking, though, what you're going to see is the seller is going to say, hey, I will do that as long as you are under contract on your house and you've gotten through the inspection, because that's where most deals, if they fall apart, are going to fall apart. So now you've got the challenge as the person who's got to sell the home first before you buy. How confident are you in yourself to do the work, to get out, look at homes, put an offer in? It's got to be a decent enough offer to get accepted. And maybe on the first home, you got a 45-day closing. You can get this one in 30 to 44 days, and you can close on time or early, right? You've got to know yourself. I've got some people who've been looking at houses for a doggone year. That person probably doesn't want to go with that strategy. They're not as decisive. They're pickier. Me, I've purchased, personal homes. I think I've purchased 3 in my life. Every single one. One day I picked the probably 6 to 8 homes that best fit the criteria I was looking for. I went and looked at them. I think in here, there was just one. There was just this house. I love this house. I bought this house. But for the last 2, there were a top 2 in both cases. One I thought was a better money decision and one I just liked better, right? Then I had a decision with my wife. We agreed. We'd buy either one, but here's our ranking. Let's go after this one first. We put an offer in, we negotiated, and we got it. So in both cases, in all 3 cases, I know I can literally get under contract in a day because I'm decisive. I'm quick. And I also know I don't mind submitting strong offers. If I like the house, I'd way rather have the house I want than that extra $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. I don't care about that. I want the house I want. I've seen enough people living in a house that they got a good deal in, but they don't really care for the house for whatever reason. And they're like, I wish we would have paid the extra money. I'm going to pay the extra money. I want the house I want. So you've got to know yourself enough and be honest and aware enough with yourself to kind of know if that's the type of person you are or not, right? So back to, you're going to keep the house, buy house number 2, and then come back and sell house number 1. From a realtor standpoint, that is beautiful because now when I'm presenting your buy side offer, there's no contingency, which is awesome. That makes that a very attractive, very strong offer. Okay. So now if you're looking for 5, 10, whatever it is, grand off, you're asking for closing costs, whatever it is you're doing, it's way more attractive to do that. Now you've got to get approved by the lender, and they're going to look at any debt, any mortgage that you've got on house number 1. So are you able to get approved for both? That's a question. You also might get approved for both, but you can only afford 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, % down on that mortgage. And you want to maybe put 50% down, 75% down to reduce your payment. Here's the challenge with that, because I've had a lot of people say, we'll just do it. We'll sell the house and then we'll take that chunk of change and we'll put it down. Cool. Your mortgage will be the same now, right? Let's use numbers. Let's say you're buying a $500,000 home and you've got 50 grand to put down. But you're going to use 300 grand from the sale of that first house, right? So if you'd sold the house, you'd have the 300 grand plus the 50 you have is 350 on a $500,000 home. I'm assuming no fees, and we're making a lot of assumptions here. You'd have a mortgage at $150,000. Your payment is going to be down here. Now, if you keep house number 1 and you go purchase home number 2 for 500 grand, putting 50 grand down. Now you owe 450. And then you sell home number 1 a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, it doesn't matter. And you take that 300 grand equity that you were going to take if you'd sold the home first and you put it down on your mortgage. Yes, you're only going to owe 150 just like you would have if you sold it first. But your mortgage payment's going to be way higher because your mortgage payment's going to be based off of the 450 that you originally took out. And it's just going to think you paid a big chunk off. You're going to save a bunch of interest that you would otherwise paid, but your mortgage payment is going to be much higher. In fact, 150 versus 450, it's going to be almost exactly 3 times higher, right? So in that case, can you refinance? Sure, you can refinance. And now your payment will be based on 150 instead of 450, but now you're going to pay refinance fees, and that's thousands of dollars. Is it worth it? Well, if you want that low fee, I've seen people do it. It makes sense. I mean, you have the options presented to you. It is what it is. But you want to have that discussion with your lender, with your realtor, with your financial advisor to make sure that whatever you're doing is the best strategy for you and your situation, right? Here's the great thing about purchasing home number 2 while still owning house number 1. And this is what most people do. The majority of people sell house number 1 either the day before or the day of purchasing house number 2 because they don't want to be homeless, right? If they're homeless for a night, it's not a big deal because they can have all their stuff sitting in a truck overnight somewhere and they can stay at a brother's house or a sister's house or whatever. Not a big deal, right? But if you are going to go out and purchase that second home while keeping the first home, and it's 30 days, 60 days, whatever, until you sell, now you're able to slowly, at your pace, at your comfort, at your convenience, transfer your goods from house 1 to house 2. It's not a race. If the company who's transferring your goods from house 1 to house 2, the moving company, if they call up and say, hey, we're going to be a day late, maybe you don't like it, but it's not the end of the world. But if you're closing on house 1 and house 2 on the same day, a 1-day delay from that moving company is a huge deal. That's going to be a big deal, right? You're going to be out of contract on the other one. Are they going to, try to come after you for money and court costs and usually it doesn't get to that level, but it could. And I've seen it threatened a lot because people get emotional in that situation. If you sell house number 1 after purchasing house number 2, you don't have to deal with any of that. But again, the challenge is, can you afford it? Can you get approved for it? That's a challenge. So guys, there are kind of the biggest things that most people are considering when they're deciding whether or not they want to do it. But I would say, number 1, you got to be in the financial position to get approved for both houses to even consider that. And the second thing would be, you've really got to have that conversation of what's more important to me, convenience or cash, right? The more convenience you can give up and you can deal with a little bit of short-term stress, the more money you're probably going to make. The more convenience you want and you don't want to deal with stress, that's fine, but it's probably going to cost you in lost price, or you're going to have to do a short-term rental that's expensive, or you're going to have to pay extra shipping or whatever it is, right? So really, in a lot of these circumstances, the discussion I'm having with these folks is, in this specific situation, do you like convenience more or money more? And the answer really, there's no right or wrong answer. The answer doesn't matter. It just, what matters is that it fits you and what you want. So guys, again, if you got any questions, comments, anything like that, put them in the comments. And even though the video will be over, I'll absolutely get back to you. Other than that, I appreciate you guys joining me, and I hope you have a phenomenal weekend. You guys take care.